as we go about our everyday business in life, we're doing something which is truly ridiculous. We're doing something that is super ridiculous, and we don't have any clue that we're doing it. If we did have a clue that we were doing it, if we caught on, that would be the first sign of mental health. If we don't, if we continue not to know that we're doing it, then there's no mental health, none whatsoever. And the reason we can say that is because if I am living in a delusion, no matter what, no matter how well I think I'm doing, that is not mentally healthy. And so instead of talking about mental health versus non-mental health, we can just talk about the two states of being deluded versus not being deluded, which is a lot simpler, really. As long as we're not deluded, we're grand. That's all we need to do, is to be not deluded. And yet, of course, that's so very hard because we don't have the faintest clue that we are deluded. So the thing that we're doing as we go about our daily lives is that every single little thing we meet, every single little thing we come across, we're assigning a meaning to. And this happens totally automatically, so that we don't know we're assigning meaning, and instead it just seems to us that that meaning belongs in the world. It's properly belonging there. I'm not projecting meaning. I am receiving it. I'm perceiving it. It's easy enough to understand what we're talking about here, because all we're talking about here is labeling. So what we're essentially saying is that as we go about our business, we can't help labeling everything. Other people, ourselves, the world in general, as it manifests in front of us, we label it all. And the funny thing about this labeling is, number one, it's involuntary. We can't stop it. It happens, like a machine doing whatever the machine's job is. So it's as if there's a labeling machine in us, labeling everything very efficiently. And it's a machine that we can't control. The machine actually controls us, which very easily happens with machines. So machines can be great. They really can be great, but big danger with a machine, and they ought to be a little kind of warning, like they have on products, like they have on some products saying "do not eat" if it's a plant that isn't edible. So there should be a little label on all the machines. Beware the machine, or don't let the machine control you, because it wants to. It will do, given half a chance. If we're dozy, it'll turn the tables on us like that and control us. And then, exactly as uh, um, quantum physicist David Bohm says, the system that has been created in this way will give us the information that we are controlling it. So the system tells us, the system is controlling us, but it tells us we're controlling it. So because it's controlling us, when it tells us we're controlling it, we believe it because it's controlling us to make sure we believe it. So that's David Bohm's way of looking at it. We never ever stop to think there's anything funny about the way we categorize things or interpret things according to our scheme. We never think anything strange about that at all, but it's a really, really big strange thing. It's a massive, colossal absurdity. If only we could see it. If we could see it, then that would be a good joke, we could say. We could have a laugh about it. If we can't see it, it's still a big joke, but the joke's on us, so we can't laugh about it because we don't get the joke. The joke is us, we don't get it. Someone else might get it and have a good laugh, which is great for them. At least we're doing something, at least we're giving someone a bit of a laugh. But we won't get it, because when you're the butt of the joke, you don't get it. And that's part of the joke. All we need to do is just think, well, why do I have to label every single thing that I come across? What is that? Why the hell do I do that? And what kind of dangerous thing is it to do? All I'm going to do is create a world made up of my own labels. And that's very claustrophobic. Because my labels are me, so I'm looking at a world that is me. I'm looking at a world that is a reflection of me. Or it might be better to say that we're looking at a world that is a faithful image of the assumptions we've made in looking at the world. So the world is a reflection of the machine that I'm using to interpret the world, which is another way of talking about the machine controlling us. And it shows just how easy it is for things to flip over. So supposing I was labeling things in a way that was conscious and suited whatever I'm doing, I could look at an oak tree and I could say, that's the common oak. I could look at a butterfly and say that's whatever type of butterfly. And that's fine. That could be useful because I could be an ecologist. I could be doing a catalogue of all the living creatures that are around. So that's useful. Labeling, it's not an absurd act in this case. It makes perfect sense. Or if I've got loads of food in the kitchen, in the fridge, and some of it's old and some of it isn't, so I can label it. So Thursday, the 21st of June was when I opened that or left that in. And that's useful, because that way I won't eat it when it's been there for weeks and weeks and weeks, which could make me get sick. So that's the definition of something that's really useful, can stop me getting sick. So labeling foodstuffs in the fridge isn't a bad idea. It could be a good idea. And labeling ingredients in the ingredient jars in the cupboard in the kitchen, so we know the difference between salt and sugar, just to carry on giving fairly simple ideas. All of that's good stuff. That's us using a machine. Where it flips over, turns round on us, is where we label unconsciously, where we label automatically without knowing that we're labeling, and we label all the time, so there's never any gap in the labeling process. It's just that machine is just firing label, firing off the whole time, and I'm completely oblivious to it. And if that sounds strange, it isn't, because that's what we do all the time. We're firing off labels the whole time, absolutely everything. We could be labeling dozens of things at the same time, and yet we absolutely don't know that we're labeling it. So it's like we're getting lazy. We don't notice the procedural bit where we process information. We just look at the output, where the final product, the output of the machine, pops out on the screen, and we just look at that and we think that's the same as reality. So this is the type of laziness that generally gets called unconsciousness, psychological unconsciousness, that kind of state of being asleep. It's basically mental laziness taken to an extreme. Not to say that this is a moral issue and lazy people are bad, merely to say that this is how the machine gets the upper hand. And the reason the machine gets the upper hand is because we're now living in a world of labels that we don't know are labels. And so what that means is, because we're taking it, the labels at face value as if they're actual bona fide reality, and they're not, they're a construct, they're an artificial creation. So what that means is that we're being controlled by it. As long as we think that the construct isn't a construct, we're being controlled by the construct. And the reason for that is we're basing all of our decisions on the premise that the construct isn't a construct. And so the fact that it is construct is actually how we are being controlled. Like if I tell you a whole bunch of lies and you go ahead and believe the lies and act on that basis, I am controlling you. I'm not following you around telling you what to do. I'm just giving you a whole bunch of false information, and that's controlling you very, very effectively indeed. I don't need to follow you around, shout at you, or stalk you, or anything like that. So this is the quintessential way of controlling. Give them a load of false information, give them a complete system of false information with no truth in it at all. Then they can act out of what they perceive to be their own true will, but it's only their own true will in the context of the construct that they're living in, which they don't realize is a construct. It's impossible for me to have free will if I am living in a simulation, a mind-created simulation that I don't know to be a simulation. Because everything I do is the simulation. The simulation is facilitating me in everything I see, everything I think, and everything I do, allowing me to think that it's for real and that there's genuine choice there. But there isn't. I'm being controlled by that simulation. So as we go around labeling the world, what we're doing, we're creating a simulation. That's how a simulation is created, by having a seamless set of labels all joined up together, labels for everything. Then we're in the labeled world, and we've got a label too. So everything's got a label on it, and we relate to those labels. So I might have a big label on my forehead, and my car, I can put a label on my car and say, this is my car. I can put a label on my dog and say, this is my dog, etc., etc. Then I relate to the labels and lose sight of what the label is about, or supposed to be about. So in this way, we create a simulation without knowing it's a simulation, and so the simulation is totally controlling us. So in this case, the device has got the better of us. We've become prisoners of the device, victims of the device. And yet, this here device is my own thing. I made it. It's like, aren't I smart? I made this device. It's like a labeling machine. It can label stuff, which can be really helpful. Then I take my eye off the ball, and the next thing, the labeling machine has labeled everything. It's labeled the whole universe, and I've become the label of myself, living in the label of the universe, and I never realize. So that is definitely the machine, which is the same thing as the simulation or the device. That is definitely the machine controlling me. How can it not be? I am being totally determined by that machine. Every last thing about me, everything is being determined by the machine. I'm living in the simulation, so that everything about me is being determined by that simulation. So this is a really, really major kind of thing. We can't gloss over it and say, it doesn't matter living in the simulation. It doesn't really make any difference if you're living in a simulation, as opposed to not living in a simulation. We can't say, that's a small thing. Let's talk about the important stuff instead, because the important stuff is that we're living in a simulation. Nothing else matters but to know that, just as Gojo says. Gojo says, if you suddenly realize you're a prisoner, then to a reasonable person, there's only one thing that matters now. It's getting out of that prison. Nothing else matters. Now, of course, I might think, well, there are other things that matter. I can do this, I can do that, and I have this. I have a hobby. I might do this and do that. So I could be living in the simulation and saying, well, it doesn't matter if I'm living in a simulation, and actually not even knowing that I'm in a simulation and think all these other things are important. But they're not important. They're only the simulation. And by taking an interest in all these things, which aren't the awareness that I am in a simulation, then all of those things, me taking an interest in all of those things that are the simulation without knowing that they are the simulation, is how the simulation controls me and traps me and imprisons me. So what that means is that every act that isn't an act of radical rebellion is an act of abject total conformity to the machine. Such total abject conformity to the machine that I don't even know it's an act of conformity to the machine. I think I'm being pretty smart. I think I'm being pretty original, pretty resourceful. I think I'm doing my own stuff, that I'm being autonomous. I can even be a rebel in this simulation. It's cool to be a rebel. But the simulation is facilitating me in being a rebel in this case. So me being a rebel in the simulation is me conforming utterly disgracefully. There couldn't be a bigger act of conformity than the act of believing that you are a rebel within the simulation without realizing that it is only the simulation of a rebel. So it's very, very stark unless we grab the bull by the horns and don't lose sight of the fact that by labeling everything we're becoming prisoners of our own device and living in a fake reality that is a projection from inside us that's been thrown out there based on nothing at all but a whole bunch of half-baked assumptions. So to go back to what I was saying before, that is really me being the butt of the joke. That really is me being a fool, being made an obvious fool of. So here I am walking down the road, doing things, talking to people, thinking that I'm in the world, but I'm not. I'm just projecting it out really fast and not seeing that I'm projecting it and then living in that projected world. Yet the whole time thinking that I'm in the world. So that is the joke. That is the joke. That is the thing that is super ridiculous. And not only is it super ridiculous, it's super entrapping because there's absolutely no way that I'm ever going to be free from it until I do grasp the bull by the horns. So, excuse me, what we can say is that if we are at all serious about therapy, about psychology, about mental health, there's only one thing that matters, and that is perceiving the way in which we are continually deluding ourselves. If whatever type of therapy or whatever the hell it is I'm doing doesn't involve me learning to see that I'm fooling myself, deluding myself, then it's just part of the simulation, it's part of the dream. So in that case, what's happening is that I am escaping within a dream. In other words, I'm in the dream and I'm dreaming that I'm escaping from the dream is just a dream, which is what Greg Tucker talks about a lot. So, as he relates, Greg Tucker was practicing as a psychotherapist for years and years and years and years, doing the stuff that psychotherapists do, doing all that good old psychotherapy stuff. Then one day he happened to read a book by Wei Wu Wei, And it shocked him so much he completely revised his way of doing therapy, and his therapy then became much more simple. So whereas beforehand, any type of therapy that takes place within the simulation without us knowing it's a simulation is only more of the simulation, and the only thing it does is get us more trapped in the simulation, even though we're thinking we're doing stuff to untrap us. So what Gregory Tucker realized then is that the only thing that is real, that could possibly be real, is actually seeing that we're in a simulation, or that we're in a dream, as he puts it. And Greg also says that what we're all engaged in is trying to escape or become real within the dream. So there is this big dream, which he says is the dream that mind dreams. Mind dreams. That's the dream that mind dreams. So we're in the dream, but we don't want to be in a dream. We don't know it's a dream, but there is a kind of sense of ontological insecurity in the dream because it's not resting on anything, because it's a dream. So this sense of ontological insecurity drives us to engage in activities that have as their aim to make us feel more real, to make us feel that we are real, that I can get to feel I'm actually a person, I'm actually real. Now that can't ever take place within the context of a dream, because it doesn't matter how many times I dream that I'm real, it's still a dream. But our activities are kind of fairly tortuous attempts to somehow get to feel real. And that's our ultimate, if undisclosed, goal, our ultimate, if undisclosed agenda, to somehow become real within the dream. And he goes on to say that this causes problems, because if we ever do come across something that can actually show us the impossibility of trying to dream that we're real, or dream that we're woken up, then even though this is the one thing we need to know is that I'm dreaming, or this is a simulation, we absolutely don't want to know it because it's at odds with our agenda. Because our agenda is we want to be real. Or we could also say my agenda as the idea of myself, as the construct that the machine of thought tells me I am. So my hidden agenda as that construct is to be not a construct. And because that is our fundamental agenda, which we don't see to be an agenda, we're not actually interested in mental health at all. We're not actually interested in becoming undeluded at all.